Welcome everyone to my channel. Today I present to you the third of several backstories based on the camping nightmare Lost in the Woods. The story I wrote that featured Cyrus the Bigfoot. These stories will round out what you know about Cyrus' life from the perspective of each character and add depth to him. There's so much we don't know about these creatures in real life, so this series is intended to let our imagination see things from their perspective, and just maybe how they might perceive life and our world we share. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification, share, and give this a thumbs up. Please enjoy the second part of Thadon, Cyrus' friend and foe, as we get right into it. I will tell you the rest of my story now. After I arrived in the Mountain of Banishment, I felt so lost. I knew no one, and everything was so strange. I mean, of course the terrain and landscape was similar, but there was no family or friends, just the occasional encounter with an irritated inhabitant. I found a small creek and made myself some bedding to rest. Before I knew it, I could hear what sounded like humans in the distance on the other side of the creek. I quickly grabbed some rocks and climbed into the large tree I was under. Sure enough, about 40 paces away, there were 4 humans, and all of them had metal weapons. I knew I had a decision to make. Stay completely still and silent and hope they didn't see me, or get rid of them somehow. Well, I made the wrong decision. I waited until they were directly across the creek from me, and I threw a single rock at one of them. They scrambled around in fear and started yelling and looking around. So I took this chance to use a technique taught to me by one of the older males to project my voice. So I did. I made it sound like I was actually 3 or 4 of us all around the area to scare them away. All it did was make them start hunting me. 2 of them came across the creek where I was and started looking around. I threw another rock in the distance to the side of where they were facing, and one of them rushed towards the sound. The other stood below the tree I was in, so I reached down, grabbed the human, and quickly hoisted him up. I knocked his head on a branch to let him sleep, and then grabbed his metal weapon. I let him back down to the ground and then snapped his metal weapon in half. I threw it at the other humans as I dropped out of the tree and made a run for it. The others across the creek started using their metal weapons, and thankfully, I was not bitten. I ran about 10 paces and then leaped into another big tree and hid myself. I could still see them in the distance as they ran toward the one human I put to sleep, and they got him up and they all ran away. I was thankful that the situation didn't get worse. I realized then that I would never be safe here and had to learn to be even more defensive and clever. About 10 moons later, I was foraging for some mushrooms and bugs when I came across another one of us. I was actually caught off guard seeing her. She appeared to be the same age as me. I went up to her and asked her her name. She sneered at me and told me to leave her alone. I told her that I was new here and didn't know how many of our species there were. She then asked me abruptly what I did to get banished and sent here. I told her the main parts. She just looked at me and smiled and said that I sure was a rogue one. She asked me my name and I told her Thadon. She said her name was Alna. She then told me to follow her. As we were walking to wherever she was taking us, it was starting to get dark. She stopped us right in our tracks and started sniffing the air. She said very calmly, "Cougars and bears are near." I have smelled bears before and didn't think anything of it. However, I had never smelled a cougar, so I just had to take her word for it. She glanced her eyes side to side and said again calmly, "We are surrounded." Just then, 2 cougars leaped down from a tree above us, and a black bear came from the side. One cougar landed on me and another on Alna. The bear bit down on my leg as I was grappling with the cougar. Alna grabbed the cougar that was on her and instantly ended it. I, on the other hand, was struggling to get it off my back and fend off this bear. I managed to kick the bear full force in the side, and it rolled about 4 paces. Suddenly, I felt the cougar let go off of my back. As I spun my head around, I saw Alna end it. I was in amazement of this female. Not only was she beautiful, but she was skilled and strong. I felt love for her immediately. My thoughts were put into check, though, as the bear bit me in the leg again. I bent down and wrapped my arms around it and squeezed until it stopped moving. It was only asleep, but we got out of there as fast as we could. Alna took me to her family, and they welcomed me in. It didn't take long for her to feel the same way about me. Several moons later, we became mates. Life finally seemed to be good for me now. Everything was turning peaceful, but that would be short-lived. You see, no matter where you go, there will always be someone who is a leader in any territory you go. Every species has a leader in its territory. The only exception is the Mountain of Banishment. Any powerful species can be leader over all the other species here. Well, the leader at the time was one of the notoriously evil black bears named Kelkar. He always wanted to fight our species, and frankly, he was quite strong and large. There were 2 males that fought him, and they lost. It appeared that he wanted to fight me now because I was the largest of our species to ever have been in the Mountain of Banishment. He sent some of his goons to let me know he wanted to fight. Alna's friend Pasha told me that one of the males that lost was her uncle, and I needed to be very careful. I needed to end him if we were to have peace. I didn't want to fight him, much less end him. Alna and I came back to our den from foraging only to find it destroyed. We both knew who did this, and it left me no choice. Alna was carrying my young one, and I could not let this go any farther. So I went to meet Kelkar. When I saw him, he stood up on 2 legs and simply said, "Are you prepared to be ended, you stupid ape?" I just said in return,
"Not today, Kelkar."
He rushed right at me full force. I started running at him. As he was almost at me, I jumped over him and grabbed a tree branch from above and broke it off as I landed on the ground. Since he was so large, he tripped and rolled once as he came to a stop to turn around. As he faced me, I was already midway in the air with both arms raised overhead holding the branch. As I was coming down to the ground, I was swinging the branch over my head and down to hit Kelkar. I shattered the branch over his head. He stumbled and fell sideways, and I jumped on top of him. I hit him full force over and over. He got me a few times in the arm, but I was by far winning. I could see the fear in his eyes that he would be ended that day, but I couldn't do it. So I left him a permanent reminder to never challenge me again. I swiped at his face with my hand open and nails out, and slashed him across the face. He went to sleep after I did that, and I got up and left him there. All the other rogue animals dispersed and left him there as well. Alna and I went back to tend to my wound and rebuild our den to prepare for our young one. I was now recognized as the new leader in the territory. A few months later, we had our first white rain during the cold times. It made things more difficult because we could leave footprints more easily. Alna was heavy with young one, and we needed some meat to get us through the cold times. So I went out to hunt. I traveled for 1 moon to get to an area where there are deer. I had my eye on one particular that was a little sickly. You see, the law of the forest tells us that if we hunt other animals, They can only be old or sick ones and only enough to feed our family unit. This helps all animals to keep as safe and numerous as we can. No one is foolish enough to purposely overhunt or target only healthy animals, because they will answer to our species. We are the guardians of the forests over all the earth. Our only real fear is humans. They do not respect any law we have. They do have their own laws, as humans are the ultimate keepers of the earth. We must respect them, but we choose to stay away from them as they are unpredictable, and some are rogue, as I well know. So now I keep as much distance from humans as I possibly can. Unfortunately, as I was approaching the deer, I noticed movement to my left. It was a human male with a metal weapon, and he was going for the same deer I was. At this point, I couldn't run as I would make too much noise. So I projected a yell away from me, and the human looked very scared by it. He started looking around, and that bought me time to cloak among the trees. I grabbed a small branch in each hand and kicked the tree I was behind and let the white rain fall on me while I kept my arms in and held the branches out with my hands. It's another technique taught to all of us in our young times to keep safe during the white rains. After I was sure the human was gone, I got the deer I was there for. So I brought it back and restored it in the ground for food later on. Several moons pass, and it's now time for Alna to give birth to our young one. I had so much fear, joy, and love. I couldn't even sleep the night she was to give birth. Several females, including her mother, went into our den to help her. I waited outside with her father. It felt like an eternity. All I could hear was Alna roaring in pain and other females calming her. I was helpless to take away the pain. Then, to my great relief, one of the females said that our young one was a healthy young female. I was so happy. Alna wanted a daughter, and I didn't care as long as they were okay. The females all came out holding our new young one. They looked rather concerned, though. I asked what's going on. Alna's mother told me that she was very, very weak, and I needed to go in right now. So I rushed right in. There Alna was, laying there, covered in remnants of the birth and holding out her hand towards me. She said she felt cold, so I packed some grass and leaves over her. She told me she loved me and that she didn't think she would make it. I told her everything would be okay, and we will raise our daughter together. Her grip weakened as she said she wanted to see the young one. So I went out and got her and brought her in. Alna smiled and said she looked just like me. She told us both that she loved us. As I grabbed her hand, it went limp, and my dear mate was no longer alive. It was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. I just kneeled beside her crying while holding our new young one that I would now raise alone. Alna's mother and father came in and they started mourning with me. We went outside and many of our species and others came to show respect. Some of the older males asked what the name of the young one would be. I looked over at Alna's parents and said that our young one would be named after her mother. My young one's name is Alna. We mourned my mate for 10 moons, and to be honest, I am still mourning her to this day. I would now be raising our offspring alone. I now face a whole new set of challenges raising Alna alone. I have the help of her grandparents, but it's still my responsibility. As she grew, I would show her our ways, just like I was taught. I taught her how to forage, the basics of hunting, how to hide from humans, and how to defend herself. She would need these skills as she grew. I told her everything I could remember about my parents, my young times, all the antics Cyrus and I pulled, and how he was my best friend. I told her that if anything ever happened to me, she was to find Cyrus. I knew despite what we went through, Cyrus would take care of her, and he would be something great among our species. Even though I still had love for my friend Cyrus, I had so much hate and oppressed feelings that I never dealt with. Many moons later, though, those feelings would come up. A report reached me that Kelkar had picked a fight with a new male of our species, and that the male nearly ended Kelkar, but let him live. I asked who was now here to be banished. They said it was Cyrus. It caught me off guard, and I got so upset. They said he was here to dethrone me and take leadership for himself, and I was not going to let that happen. I dropped what I was doing and ran straight to fight him. As I got closer, I yelled at him that he shouldn't have come. I leaped through the air at him and we fought. The last thing I remember from that fight was being on the ground, getting hit with a rock over and over. I woke up during the night and stumbled back to my den. One of the males told me what happened and how Cyrus let me live. That's when it hit me. Cyrus was not here to take leadership, otherwise he would have. He must have actually gotten himself banished. My once friend let me live. How could I have been so quick to judge him or believe hearsay? All that did was leave me beaten up. I stayed in my den for several moons to recuperate. A couple hundred moons passed when I decided to find Cyrus and face him, but this time with peace in view. I traveled over 2 mountains to get to where he and his new mate Pasha lived. It was no surprise that he chose Pasha. Her and Alna were friends, and Pasha is a good female. I heard Pasha's mother Plina warn them that I was coming. From a distance, Cyrus came out to meet me. I asked him why he didn't finish me when he could. What he said changed me. He said,
"Because you were once my best friend. I still view you as my brother."
I knew I was the one who needed to change and not him. So I went up to him and we put our hands on each other's shoulders and cried. I told him how sorry I was for what I had done and for everything in my past. He invited me to stay with his family for a couple of moons to catch up. So I did. I did not tell him about my daughter Alna, but I will be today. We are about to go out and forage for berries and bark for tonight. I am enjoying having my friend back. He is actually more like my brother. Well, now I must go. It's time for us to head out to forage.